LPVOs suck. Okay, not really, I'm kind of joking, but for some things, LPVOs, low-powered variable optics, do suck for a lot of consumers on a lot of different kinds of rifles. Now, the reason this question is kind of coming up right now is there's a lot of folks who are kind of rethinking or just in the process of their journey of educating themselves on, equipment and optics and, what rifles are for, and also looking at current events, what's going on in Ukraine right now, what happened in 2020. They're starting to reevaluate what their rifle is really for. And that's awesome. That's what we should be doing. Instead of just building a gun and going, oh, this is the latest trend that we saw some tier 1 unit do, this is the rifle that is going to work for me based on something, people should be asking the question of why they're building out a rifle a certain way. Now, over the last 9 years, I've shot around 500,000 rounds, and in shooting all those rounds, I've also used a lot of different equipment. I've shot all kinds of different scopes, fixed magnified optics, red dots, magnifiers, just all kinds of weird stuff. Good stuff, lame stuff, and stuff that's kind of in the middle. And over the last couple years in particular, as I've started to shoot longer range, I've started to kind of rethink the whole hey, what kind of optic do I actually want to put on my rifle, and what is it actually for? So the whole 1:6 thing, which everyone has been on the bandwagon for and has been using them in the past, there's just a couple things in particular that I think people need to consider if they're getting into a 1:6, 1:8, 1:10 type optic for a rifle such as this one. And the first one is durability and how rugged the optic is. Typically speaking, LPVOs, your 1:6 scopes out there, are not crazy durable. They're not super tough. I've fried way more 1:6 scopes than any other type of optic out there. You have to have a little bit more understanding of what that optic can do, especially if it's a second focal plane and you're shooting at distance. How is your your point of impact going to change if you're shooting on 3X at 400 meters versus 6X at 500 meters? They're a little bit more complicated to use. They're a little bit less durable, and they're pretty pricey to get into. Now, what we've seen from current events such as Ukraine, Russia, some stuff from 2020, a lot of people are realizing that having some magnification for a gun outside of home defense is a pretty good idea. And I think it's also a pretty based idea if you're trying to build out a loadout or have some sort of planning around being what people are coining as a modern day Minuteman. Red dots on rifles are great at close range. With magnifiers, they can be used a little bit further than that, but if we're actually shooting a dedicated rifle out to 200 to 500 meters, having a specific optic for that use case is going to just be a whole lot better than running a red dot and a magnifier. And I've shot a lot of red dots and magnifiers, and it is usable, but isn't the best. It can be done, but it's not as good as something like an actual 1:6 or something like this. Now, the Trijicon ACOG, which is what we're talking about right now, has been around for 20 years, which is kind of a testament to just how awesome the optic is, that it's been around for so long. It's still in use by militaries all over the world. We are seeing some of them used by Ukrainian forces against the Russians on MCXs and stuff. It's an optic that is still in service after 20 years. But there's a particular model of ACOG that a lot of folks don't know about. They don't realize the benefits that it brings to the whole conversation of, do I put a 1:6 on my gun, or is there something a little bit better? This is the Trijicon TA02. Now, some of you all may not be familiar with this particular model, and most of you probably aren't, because it kind of flies under the radar compared to the more traditional TA31, which I'm sure some of you guys watching this have been issued and have used. It's the traditional Trijicon ACOG with the fiber optic that allows mounting of an RMR or other miniaturized optic in the rear. Now, with this particular ACOG, there are some problems. Having the RMR up top generally gets in the way of your helmet mounts, your helmet when you're getting a sight picture, and the sight picture itself when it's mounted here to the rear is not very conducive with night vision and gas masks. So when I found the TA02 model, and I remember seeing a picture of I think it was an Irish Ranger or something like that, and I was like, what's that? I want my RMR in the front. Basically what this is a battery-powered ACOG, so the fiber optic is gone, which there's some advantages to that and some disadvantages. But what that allows is the mounting interface for the the RMR can actually be in the front, which means there's room for your night vision if you're running this optic passively. It means it's a clear, better sight picture if you're using a gas mask or just in general shooting. Tall mounts is obviously all the rage right now, has been for a few years. It gives you, like, roughly, it's like a 2.5-inch height. So if you understand your height of rapport offset, it's not a problem shooting inside of 50 meters, which is what these guys are doing. They're running the RMRs on top of their ACOGs right now. They're probably not using their ACOG inside of 50 meters, although you can for stuff like headshots. So the thing I really like about this optic right here is it comes, and you can buy it separately, as we have this available on our site because, you know, I just really like it. It can come as its own package, all set up, ready to go. All you have to do is slap a battery inside the battery compartment for the ACOG, slap it onto your rifle, and you are good to go. Now you might wonder, well, why are you recommending an ACOG? It's 20 years old when I can go get the new Sig Tango 6T that's being issued by SOCOM. And the answer is yes, you can. However, there are some advantages to the Trijicon ACOG over 1-6 scopes. The first is it's lighter. It's also, generally speaking, a whole lot more durable. The glass in some cases is more clear. The light transmission's a little bit better when you're shooting at low light. And the BDC reticle in there, if you're running a 16-inch gun, is just a lot more simple. A lot simpler, or a lot easier to understand. So for newer shooters, what I've particularly found is when I give them an ACOG and I have a 16-inch gun or a 14.5 and I tell them, hey, there's little numbers on here, you know, the 1, 3, 4, and 6 and stuff. Target at 300 meters, where do you think you'll hold? And they go, oh, the 3. They shoot, hit, good to go. When you have like a mill-based reticle and like a second focal plane scope, and you're on 3X, and you're like, oh, is it the second mill or is it the third mill? And it's a little bit more complicated. Now, if you're a really squared-away shooter, you're not gonna have any trouble at all knowing exactly where to hold with that reticle, especially if you shot with that scope a lot. But the ACOG is, in particular, is a little bit easier to use for those shooters who aren't able to shoot long range a whole lot. And for most of you guys watching this, you probably have an indoor range somewhere where maybe you can zero 100 meters, maybe once a year somewhere at like your family's farm or something. And then you go to the indoor range and you're only able to practice with something like the RMR. Which means you need an optic that even if you can't practice with all the time, you know exactly, hey, if I end up going to this range and shooting at distance, I just have to use my numbers for the BDC. It's gonna line up with my 16-inch barrel and I'm good to go. So your first round hit probability can really go up. So the way I kind of see this optic is this is really, it's really hard to beat as an optic to recommend to your average citizen, your average person who wants some capability of engaging at distance, having good positive identification, and also having a way of shooting up close very easily. The other cool thing with this particular combo right here is it's pretty cost effective. It ends up being the price of a lot of your 1-6 optics out there before they even have a mount. And that's another benefit I really like about the ACOG. You don't have to worry about leveling, you don't have to worry about using different mounts. You can literally slap it on your gun and you're good to go. Now some of you guys might go, well, the problem with the ACOG is the eye relief. 1.5 inches. I remember, when I was issued an ACOG or whatever argument you have for why the ACOG sucks. And the answer is yes, the eye relief sucks if you are not allowed to mount it properly on the upper receiver because of your backup rear sight. And I'll admit, yeah, if you have to jack your ACOG all the way to the front because of your little rear sight in the back, you're right, the eye relief's pretty bad. I've got to run my stock all the way in to actually get a good sight picture. But if you can mount the ACOG more properly, if that's good grammar, properly, and actually mount to the rear of the upper receiver, the sight picture really isn't bad at all, especially if you just have a decent amount of just understanding and training of getting a good sight picture, good stock placement and all of that. It's really not a problem, even an 1.5 inches. Now, if you're shooting a larger caliber like 7.62, and you start getting smacked in the eye or your eye pro, that's a little bit different. But on a 5.56 gun like this, mounted to the rear of the upper receiver, I'm good to go. I still have room with the RMR in the front for my night vision. I'm set, it's not gonna be a problem. So if you're interested in purchasing an ACOG and going this direction versus 1-6s and stuff like that, or maybe you just want to try this and then later get a 1-6 and see which is better, really all you have to do is purchase the optic, slap it onto your gun, set that good length of pull, good eye relief, and then zero for 100 meters. And what I recommend is if you are going this route, sticking to like a 16-inch, 14.5, 13.9 sort of area where that barrel length can actually line up a little bit better and properly with the BDC reticle of the ACOG. I have run these on shorter guns. You can do it. You kind of got to understand what's going on with some of the holds. But generally speaking, it's just, hey, I've got a 16-inch gun like this one right here. ACOG goes right on, zero for 100 meters, and the BDC lines up pretty much perfectly, even if you're not shooting the exact ammo that they set up the BDC for with this particular optic. So with all that said, I kind of want to go shoot. So that's what I'm going to go do. So we've talked about some of the reasons that we're a big fan of the ACOG and some of the philosophy behind why we think the ACOG is a good option for people out there who are trying to be a little bit more prepared than just having a home defense rifle or something for inside of 50 meters or whatever. And you guys are probably already thinking like, well, what about the price point the ACOG and the RMR comes in at versus other optics on the market or LPVOs or the LCAN, and what about the weight? And there's a lot of other factors out there, especially when you're making a purchase that is this amount of money. It's around, I want to say it's $1,600 to $1,700 to get this particular optic, and that's enough money that you really want to make sure you're making, you know, the best purchasing decision, which is kind of the point of this video, is to help you guys with that. So I want to give a couple comparisons to this particular optic combo that I know some of you guys are going to have. And the first is, well, hey, compared to an LPVO, what kind of price point are we looking at? Well, if we're looking at higher end LPVOs on the market, you know, whether it's the Vortex Razor HD or the new SIG Tango 6T and a bunch of those other ones out there, they all range in kind of that $1,400 or even $1,600 price range out there. Then you have to go purchase a mount. And now there's budget mounts out there you can buy for like $100, $150, and then those go all the way up to like $400 mounts out there. So at the end of the day, if you are building out a sort of a grade A, you know, high quality 1-to-6 type setup, you're going to be spending most likely around $1,800, something like that, which ends up being a little bit more expensive than this setup right out of the box. And then the next one is, well, what about the LCAN? Just that really nice 1-to-4, you know, you've got that throw lever to swap between 1 and 4. I can also put an MRDS on top. Well, those go for around $2 grand or a little bit over that, depending on which one you get. So again, the LCAN, which is very similar to this particular optic combo, or a 1-to-6 out there, ends up being more expensive than an optic like this. And then you have the other thing, which is weight. And one reason I really like this particular optic combo is when I'm building out a gun, such as this one right here that has a laser, a white light, a suppressor. It's already got a 16-inch barrel. It may have a bipod. I may have a 60-round magazine in there. Weight starts to become a much bigger factor than just having a little shorty gun with a red dot with the laser suppressor combo. So for weight, what we're looking at, I have some weights right here that I have listed. On some of your 1-to-6 scopes out there and your mounts, you're looking at 1 pound and 10 ounces, something like that, getting pretty close to 2 pounds. With this particular combo right here, the ACOG RMR combo, which is kind of what we're talking about, we're looking at a weight of just 1 pound 4 ounces, 1 pound 3.9 ounces, which means I can add a laser such as this D-ball, which comes in at 7.3 ounces. This is going to equal the same amount of weight as something like this Razor with the ScalarWorks 193 mount. So when you start looking into building out a fully operational type rifle, well, I can just squeeze a lot more into the gun with less weight going with this particular optic package than going with a 1-to-6. Now, obviously, you know, it comes down to like, oh, well, how fit are you? And oh, you know, it's just some extra weight, just go, you know, lift weights more. And yes, that's obviously a thing you can do, but we generally find people and see people trying to lighten their rifle as much as possible, even if they're totally jacked out of their mind, because a lighter gun is just easier to carry all day, no matter how jacked you end up being. So that's just one benefit of this particular combo. They obviously can range in weight depending on what red dot you decide to put on top, and this is another thing about the TA02 that I really like. There are different optic plates out there, one of which we've brought to market, and that is, well, both of which actually right here. We have the Aimpoint Micro mount, which again mounts here in the front, which we really like for that passive aiming heads up, you know, gas mask type shooting, versus the rear, like we talked about earlier. And then we have this one that's made for the Aimpoint Acro, which has a different footprint. It's just how the Acro is. The nice thing about this one, the micro footprint, is if you have a cheaper, more budget sort of micro dot out there, like our primary arms, or I think even the Spark and some of the other ones out there, that'll go on here just fine. So now you can do that sort of budget red dot on top of a TAO2 if you just go and buy that ACOG by itself. Now I still really like just the value of buying the ACOG with the RMR on top and just being good to go. One price point, one optic already built, drop it onto the gun. That's something that I really appreciate. And then there's another fun little thing you can do, sort of kind of PUBG-esque, I guess. If you do end up buying this optic, you know, out of the box, ready to go, you can always harvest the RMR off to add to your pistol. You know, if you go out and upgrade your Glock 19, you know, with a ZEV duty slide or something like that, most pistols out there can accommodate RMR footprint optics. That's what this guy is right here. Well, now I could actually, if I really wanted to, or I was really desperate or whatever, I could actually repurpose that piece of equipment on this optic to my handgun, which is not something you're going to do on other optic mounts or packages out there. Like even the Spectre 1-4 optic with the either it's the doctor's side or the MRDS optics that sometimes go on those, or their weird optic that they include. Like, you're not necessarily going to be able to put those on a handgun super easily compared to something like the Trijicon RMR. So that's something that's just a little added benefit to this package. It is just very robust for what you get. And really my favorite thing about the ACOG as an optic, and we'll probably discuss this a lot more in future, is if you're someone, and this is probably most of you guys, who don't have a range you can train at distance, having an optic that allows you to shoot much more easily at distance is going to be much more beneficial for you. If you're not able to train at distance very often, what I have found to be most helpful is having an optic that is essentially more easy to use at distance than having, you know, a second focal plane 1:6 or 1:10 scope, or having a mill-based reticle. Having a BDC reticle that is built around a particular barrel length, like the 16-inch rifle right here, makes shooting out to distance as an inexperienced long mid-range type shooter much easier. Your first round hit probability goes up, is typically what I've found with beginner shooters when it comes to going out to distance. So if you're someone who's in an apartment, you want the ability to shoot out to 200-300 meters, you can only do that maybe once a year. That's another benefit that the ACOG really has over other optics, in my opinion, with the BDC all built in, and just how easy and simple it is to use this optic. I know the eye relief is really short at 1.5 inches, but what I've actually found compared to some LPVOs and other optics out there is, because I know I have to get my face up close, it's actually very forgiving once you're there. Even if you're in a weird position, shooting underneath a car, like on your support side, because your right hand is all mangled or something weird, it's actually easier to get that side picture, because I know, well, I got to suck my head in there and, oh, there's the optic, you know, there's the full field of view that I have of that, that I have going on, and that just makes it a little bit easier than some of the 1:6s out there, 1:10s, especially the 1:10s. Typically, those are usually more finicky. So that's something I've really liked, even just for like newer shooters out there. It's just a much more straightforward optic. I've got magnification. I have up close single dot for shooting. It's just a very straightforward optic, and that's something that I really like. But as we all know, after you've purchased an optic like this, it really does come down to you being able to train with it. If that's only inside of 25 meters or 50 meters, that's okay, that's fine. You could still run the ACOG and do like small targets. You could do headshots. You could zero that for 100 meters, and then later when you have the ability to shoot distance, you can go out and do that. Until then, you might just be using the RMR up close. That's fine as well. I do want to say, as just like a further clarification point, I'm not saying that this is the fastest, best optic combo out there. I think for what it provides some of the best features and the best value to most shooters out there. This is not my fastest shooting rifle that I have, as far as if I want to go out and burn down a bunch of drills at 50 meters, a bunch of drills from the Practical Training Shooting Group guys, or some of our drills on our website. A red dot carbine with just no suppressor, no laser, just a weapon light on there, I will shoot that gun faster than something like this. But this rifle is a little more well-rounded for some of the other activities that I might want to do on the range, or shooting out a little bit further than just shooting those close-range drills that I want to shoot really fast and shoot really well. So that is kind of a clarifying concept I want to give for this particular optic. I do like how well-rounded it is. I don't think there's any such thing as a do-all rifle. You're always going to give up something to get something else. But if I'm really trying to kind of like a video game, I want my race car to be in the middle of everything, kind of like what a Glock is. It's not the best gun ever, but it is kind of in that middle tier of everything. I really do think that this optic happens to be one of those optics. It is really good at a lot of different things. It is kind of that middle of the road, just nice and consistent, and it's also quite durable, and that is the last point I'm going to give you, and I recommend staying and watching this next clip that's going to roll right now. And now for the real test. It didn't seem like very much. So, everything's good to go. But now to see if it's still zeroed. So, I just took the ACOG off, chucked it across the ground, threw it really high, put it back on the gun, just did 3 consecutive hits at 400 meters on an 8-inch target. So it's a reduced C zone. It's not even like a big, Terran size thing, tiny thing. And as you can see, the ACOG, took a direct impact on the RMR. RMR is still clean, good to go, not cracked, ready to keep shooting. And the ACOG's fine. Just some little scratches. Not something you can normally do with an LPVO. So yeah.